This is Tabletop Babble, and I'm Kenny. Hello. Today, it is January 22nd, 2021, and I just spoke with DM's Guild brand manager and Witch of Many Hats, Lysa Penrose. And I do mean many hats. Lysa is a writer, game designer, and variety streamer, among other things. Today, though, I specifically wanted to talk with her about some of her latest projects. We're talking about her game, Mundane Magic, as well as her ongoing stream, The Haunting of Good Society. As a person myself who loves magic, horror, dinosaurs, and Regency romance, I was very excited to sit down with Lysa. We've got a lot to discuss, so without one single solitary moment's delay further, let's get this witch's brew babblin'. Lysa Penrose, welcome to Tabletop Babble.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. How are you doing on this fine January day?
I am dying in a sunbeam. Like my window, we've somehow planned it so this is like a 5-minute window where the sun is pouring through this like little bit where I have it set up so I can't close the curtain. Anyway, it's like everything's reflecting on me.
So I take it that wilts you rather than energizes you.
I mean, I am a sun child. It's just a lot reflecting off of a lot of metallic things right now. I'll just paint a picture for our listeners right now.
Yeah, at this hour, too much sunbeam.
Too much sunbeam. I'll log that. Captain's log.
Well, you have been on the show before when James was running it. You were a guest with someone else at the time, I believe. Is this your first solo venture into Tabletop Babble?
I've been on Tabletop Babble at least twice, I think, but always with a group. So yeah, I think this is my first solo venture.
Very exciting. Well, in that case, please, for people out there who may not know your work, what do you do in tabletop role-playing games? What would people know you for or want to know you for?
Absolutely. I think probably what I'm most known for is my day job as brand manager for Dungeon Masters Guild, which is a publishing platform marketplace community of D&D creators. But aside from that, I wear a lot of hats. I am a game designer myself, so I've designed my own game, Mundane Magic, and written a ton of D&D 5th edition adventures and all sorts of other content, including 2 of the official hardcover books, Dungeon of the Mad Mage and Descent into Avernus. And then aside from that, I would say I might be known as a variety streamer because I stream all sorts of like gentle witchy content and games and now mini-series on my own Twitch channel.
And these are things that we want to dive deeper into. You actually got into a question that I wanted to ask that I did not include on this list of questions that I had for you. How do you think of yourself in the tabletop role-playing game space? Do you think of yourself as a writer? Do you think of yourself as just, like you said, you wear a bunch of hats? There's no label for the kind of thing you do?
There's either no label or so many labels that labels become meaningless. There was a time when I was community manager for Dungeon Masters Guild and the D&D Adventurers League and Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons all at the same time. And I think probably from coming out of that experience, I think of myself as a community manager, even though my title has changed over at Dungeon Masters Guild. I was promoted to brand manager relatively recently, maybe a year, who knows with time, a decade ago, a year ago, yesterday. I guess I would have thought of myself primarily as a community manager and maybe as a writer. Before designing the game I released at the end of last year, I was very careful to call myself a D&D writer rather than game designer, and I finally feel like imposter syndrome will allow me to call myself a game designer now.
That's interesting. So you see game design as loftier than just saying I'm a writer?
I don't know if it's necessarily loftier, but it has its own different definition. I felt like what I was doing in D&D was very much writing stories for a rule set that's already established that I'm familiar with. There were certainly ways where I thought of using rules in different unique ways for particular challenges I wrote. But I felt in large part I was creating this narrative that people get to explore and turn into their own stories. I'm facilitating ways for people to tell stories, basically. And then when I designed Mundane Magic, that used a whole different part of my brain in addition to adventure writing, because I did write a few scenarios for that as well. And I think it's that different part of my brain that makes me feel like I did something in addition to the writing, figuring out the mechanics and everything for the game. So it just feels like it's a broader term that holds more fun tasks and objectives under it.
Just a larger bucket to hold these different roles that you might serve.
Yes.
Okay, so given that we're already leaning that way, we might circle back eventually and talk more generally about tabletop role-playing games, or maybe that'll be part of this conversation. But you already brought up Mundane Magic.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about it and your process and what the game is. I've got a lot of questions about it. But just to open up, what is Mundane Magic?
Absolutely. So Mundane Magic is a game where you get to play this coven of super ultra powerful hags or crones. You are playing the Fates, and you use this artifact called the Loom of Destiny to manipulate mortals' lives. But the premise of the game is that the Loom of Destiny always seems to be broken. Somebody broke it. There's this joke where it's like, I'm not going to name names who broke it, but somebody did again. And so you have different tasks where you have to go fix the timeline, but you kind of have to roll up your sleeves, go down to the material plane, and meddle in mortal lives, like the old-fashioned way. Hands-on.
Get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration for this? What led you to create this game?
Well, let's see. I was thinking how I really wanted to create maybe a one-page RPG. I really wanted to design something beyond Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm very lucky to have been given lots of D&D gigs, but I wanted something different. And so my personality is very like, well, if I don't have a non-D&D gig, I'm going to make my own. And so I decided to make my own game, and I wanted it to be very focused on magic and spell casting, that the improvisation that you bring to role playing goes all into crafting spells. But there's a difficulty in that because magic is very powerful, and you need to figure out some way to balance it or put some form of limits around magic. And most games will do that by having like a set of spells, and you're picking from very specific spells. And so Mundane Magic started out as a one-page RPG concept, and then I was like, okay, it's going to be longer because I'm going to have to write all these spells, and I want all these focuses that can augment the spells, and then examples of how you can make your own. And it was very, very complicated. And it's actually, in its current iteration, is a really elegant, simplified game. And that is thanks to a few other games that I ended up playing when I first conceived of this idea to when I started really working on it near the end of last year, which is Good Society and also 10 Candles. Both of those I got to play, and those really changed how I viewed TRPGs. I'm a rambler, so
That's fine. I have so many thoughts because you bring up Good Society, and that's something I want to talk about later as well. But it's totally fine that it hops in here. I'll just show my hand. I love Good Society. Good Society might be my favorite role playing game.
It's so fun.
Oh my goodness! But we will get at that later. Feel free though, if it's relevant to your conversation here. Let me back up just a tad bit. The game is called Mundane Magic, and reading through it, I want to get in your brain, what is mundane? What is the mundane half of Mundane Magic?
Absolutely. So I guess the way I describe the game, it's almost very like the the opposite of mundane because you're all powerful. I mean, you don't have your artifact, but you can still create some pretty potent magics. But the thought is that you're using this magic for goodness heckin' everything. So you could be going down into the future or the past where humans evolved from a totally different animal, and maybe you're doing something like matchmaking some dinosaurs or helping a student win her student body president because this very mundane situation leads to drastic ramifications if it does not go as planned. So I suppose the scenarios are laughably mundane.
From the Fates perspectives.
From the Fates perspectives, yeah.
These situations that these mortals are involved in, that doesn't matter much, but the implications of what you're doing.
Absolutely. Like, Sally needs to be student body president, or she won't be in place to do this one really important thing in the future. So we need to boost her confidence or help her write her speech or something like that. And inevitably someone tries to use magic for something truly mundane, like ordering a coffee or something. And that, I think, is part of the fun, because once you start using magic, especially for mundane things, the game gets a little bit more chaotic.
Right. It specifically has a mechanic built in that the more you're using this magic, the more chaotic things can get.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just liked flipping through the missions because they're called mundane missions, and literally one of them, you're matchmaking dinosaurs in some sort of Regency romance period.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, how mundane indeed.
So dull.
One thing that's interesting to me flipping through it and reading through the game is that we've got a few different documents. We've got the core rules, and then we have the sample missions that you can play, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting, and this is maybe just insight into how I read through role-playing games. I learned so much more, I think, about the game reading through the missions than the rules themselves. Can you talk about like your design process, or how the rules inform the missions and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. For folks who haven't had a chance to check out the game before, I guess the rules themselves are really two main mechanics. One is what did they end up being called? Minutia, Muscle, and Moxie. So your 3 stats, which are pools of points that you can use to make quote-unquote mundane stuff happen. So you can use those points for doing stuff like sneaking or gathering rumors, or you can use them for, if we're likening this to D&D, prestidigitation level magic. And then there's spell tokens, which is where the big magic comes out. You can use 1 to 3 spell tokens to craft a spell, and if you can describe it, you can make it happen. You just kind of figure out how many tokens are needed with your GM. And then once you use those spell tokens, they flip over and they become chaos tokens. Chaos tokens are something that the GM can use in storytelling to create consequences to your having used magic on the material plane. And once they use their chaos tokens, they flip back to spell tokens. So when you play the game, there really feels like, well, there's 2 feelings. One is that it's very much like a pendulum effect of storytelling, which I feel like is nice. And even if you're afraid the GM is going to get chaos tokens, you know it's going to push the story forward. So it's not too much of a deterrent either. The other feeling is that by the end of every scenario, it feels like, whoa, did things escalate quickly? Because there's maybe like your big final challenge and you're slinging really big magic to defeat this your final boss or your final challenge, and your using magic creates more consequences, and it kind of just escalates until the GM feels like this is probably enough to throw at them.
It feels very cinematic to me. I'm reminded a lot of things that I've watched about how to orchestrate a good action scene, like in a movie or in writing, I guess, where it's all about give and take and how each move is met with a counter move. It seems like that's kind of baked into the rules here, where moves made by the players are inherently powering up the GM and the enemies of the players.
Yeah, I feel like the endings of each scenario definitely feel very cinematic, at least when I've GM'd the game. I kind of they're using spell tokens and giving me chaos tokens to make the challenges at least seem bigger or more fantastical or more ridiculous so that I can immediately give them back spell tokens to defeat everything in the most spectacular way possible. Sometimes I'll use the chaos tokens just to add almost more like superficial challenges just to make things seem more ridiculous or playfully stressful rather than an actual additional challenge at the end.
I'm a huge fan in general of these, you call them superficial challenges, but I just like putting things in front of the players that are things they can easily overcome and give them that quick boost of achievement in the game. Meanwhile, you have like a bigger framework. And that's kind of, I think, what I was getting at when I was saying the missions taught me more about the game than the rules, because reading through what you wrote and seeing these beats of where you want to get to or where you might go over the course of the game was really useful. Like, what are these chaos tokens going to be used for? And I read the missions and I see, here's the kind of story that this game is designed to tell.
Absolutely. I also, in designing the game, I could just imagine like these hags or these crones can go anywhere. It doesn't even have to be our universe. It could be a parallel universe. It could be a totally different plane. It really does feel almost more like a Doctor Who game, but with witches. But I found it difficult, even in the section where it's like how to play and there's like descriptions of like what a play session might be like. I found it difficult to fully communicate clearly what that broad range of different types of adventures could be. And so in mundane missions, it ranges from you're in the far future and you have to help the country has split into different sub countries, and you have to help this girl in Cascadia, which is the Pacific Northwest sort of like branching off. You have to help her win her student body president election. You're in Victorian London, and but this is the timeline where humans evolved from dinosaurs, so you have to matchmake dinosaurs. Or you're in the 1990s, and you have to help this cat win a cat pageant, but the twist is that the cat's really ugly. So just kind of showing the different range of how mundane things can also be really fantastic.
It's a really interesting setting in general. I was thinking about this morning. Where on the one hand, it's extremely open. Like, just describing that range of missions that come with the game, like you said, is designed to show you, look at all the things that you could do in this game, in this setting. And on the flip side, it's very specific. You are playing the Fates, you are playing these crones, trying to use your magic to set the timeline right, whatever right might mean here. So it's an interesting, like, it gives you enough to latch onto for your character while giving you the freedom to do what you want to.
I think so. I would be really interested. I had made the game thinking it would be good as a game of one-shots. But in playtesting, a few folks said they could totally imagine this being used for a longer campaign. I just wonder what that would be like, whether the memories your character actually collects because you're playing them, rather than like improvising what your memories are.
I'll tell you what grabs me, and when I look at this game and in our conversation, where my brain immediately goes, I would like to play a number of sessions in this game, and I go into, let's say, I go to prehistoric times, and I interfere with the early humans, and then I jump forward at some point because the loom breaks and I have to interfere somewhere else, and I get to see how me and my other players, how our decisions have affected things.
Oh, that's cool.
We're hundreds or thousands of years later or millions of years later. What did that do? It would be really fun to go back to the early days of humanity and you mess something up and you go to the future and it is a world of turtles that that rule the world. That to me is like the juice.
Yes. Oh, I love that thought. So it's Mundane Magic Legacy Edition.
Exactly.
And you get to see the true consequences of your actions.
It would be great too. And see, now I'm going like content brain is like kicking in right now. If you're gonna stream something like this to me sounds great because you can have a few one shots, maybe even with different players, and the new players get to inherit the good and bad choices of the previous group and see what happened.
I'm like organizing a game for I haven't announced it yet, but it's happening Valentine's Day morning, and now I'm just mad I didn't think of this already. And I'm like, is there still time?
There could be. Yeah. There could be. Oh man, yeah, that's the stuff I love. I love seeing how player choices, and it really reinforces your goals too. Of you have these fates who are above everything, and then they jump down to get their hands dirty, and now they have to reckon with the stuff that they did previously. That's really fun to me.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the game is in character creation. You create little bonds with other characters. So one question I ask is, what do you owe the character to your left and why? And the other one is, the character or the crone to your right has a really annoying fatal flaw. What is it? And that's one of my favorite things because it's just like this weird, completely manufactured inside joke that keeps coming up during the sessions. So if there were a legacy version, I'd love to see how that would evolve or what additional things
play out over time.
What additional things bring up, or does someone have an arc and they shed their fatal flaw?
It's just, I love these, incredibly powerful eternal beings that have all too human flaws and grudges. That's always good for fun.
Does the thought of leading a group through the creative landscapes of your imagination terrify you? Do you worry about being asked questions you don't know the answers to? Have you wanted to try being a dungeon or game master, but your social anxiety has been holding you back? Hi, I'm Amber, and I used to nearly vomit at the idea of running a tabletop RPG. How'd I get over that anxiety? I haven't. Surprise! I'm still an anxious mess, and you can listen to all of it on Shapeshift, where I've recorded 80% of every game I've ever ran. Over the last 4 years, I've run a ton of indie one-shots like Casketland, a weird Western horror game, to my first ever campaign using Ryutama, a Studio Ghibli-like exploration-focused game. Follow me through my journey learning how to GM and to live with my anxiety. It doesn't go away completely, but it does get easier to manage. Go to geekspective.com to find out more information or find Shapeshift on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
So obviously, I think if someone goes and checks out your Twitter profile, goes and checks out your stream, sees your stream setup, I think witch or witchiness, these are concepts that are important to you. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. What do they mean to you? Why are they important to you?
I think there are several things. As a practicing witch, the ideas of magic and spell work, and like a sort of witchy lifestyle, to me speaks to honoring and becoming closer to the earth and the turning of the seasons. In general, things like homesteading have always been really important to me. And so it's sort of a combination of integrating homesteading into our everyday lives, also just kind of an appreciation of like the holidays on the wheel of the year. What do those actually mean? We're getting to know that a little bit more intimately because of our garden and the food that we grow. And goodness, I had one other thing to add, but it must have been a lie because poof, it's out of my head.
Well, let me jump off of that because as of time of recording, I think over last week I was following the saga of you not having power.
Oh my god!
And this is, you talked about tangent. This is a total tangent. What was that experience like? Did that teach you anything?
It taught me a lot about myself. So I learned, wow, I'm really addicted to just having my phone shining in my face. Like I like there was nothing to do, so I would be on my phone constantly, and it was helpful actually that my phone would eventually die so that I could put it away. So I learned my dependence on technology just to avoid just like boredom of sitting there. It's so much more interesting to sit there with a tiny glowing rectangle.
I like the way you put that too. It's like I'm not addicted to my phone. I'm addicted to it shining light on my face.
I would
feel
just
that really hard.
the screen would go black and I would just touch it, so it would turn on again. So I learned that, and I didn't love that about myself. And so the next day, I was like, no, I'm going to make the best of this. We learned how to cook on the fireplace, which was actually really fun, making little like aluminum foil packets of like root vegetables and stuff and putting them in the fire. That was really enjoyable.
It looked really cozy.
Yeah, it was cozy, and it was definitely, the first night was cozy because it was novel. The second night we were so bored out of our minds, and then the third night I was like embarrassed about how bored I was. And so I was like, no, we're gonna have fun. This is like camping. The trouble is you don't know when your power is coming back, and you don't know if like you've been forgotten by like 3 days in. It definitely made me think a lot about when people didn't have electricity and you would have the whole family probably in one room cozied around the fire. And there's something in this book, A Witch Alone, Marion Green writes about how in times when people didn't have distractions like their computers or television, and maybe during the day everyone's working in the field because everyone works to support their families and feed their families a little more directly back in the day. And so you get into this state where you're almost kind of meditating, but really you're just spacing out. And that's sort of a magical state of being. Like that is where you can kind of harness your intentions and understand what intuitively you need to do to manifest those. So I thought a lot about that while I was sitting there bored. I was like, am I in that meditative state yet?
I was going to say, I think for me, especially, so the reason I asked is, and what reminded me is you were talking about in your answer to what is being a witch, what does witchiness mean to you, getting in touch with those older ways of being, I guess, is how I would think about it. And so being without power, being in that meditative state, I think about sitting around the campfire with my family, or when we had relatives over to cook out, it would always end in everybody just sitting around the fire and no one's saying anything. Everybody's just staring into the fire. And that, for me anyway, it feels like it does put you in touch with something older, because you're just with the people you know, feeling warmth and looking at this constantly changing flame. But that is it's always the same as well. It's just such a unique thing, and it's something I haven't got to experience in a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely when, aside from our second night when we were just letting ourselves whine the whole night, it was a little bit cathartic. Aside from that, there was something very calming and cozy about it. And I even spent some time, like, gathered a bunch of candles into one spot and wrote a little bit so that I could remember that feeling. Have that to take away when I look back at the great power outage of 2021.
All right, so quick throwaway lightning round question before I change subjects here. When you got power back, what was the thing you were most grateful to have back?
Oh my gosh. Lights at night, although it was during the day, so then probably heat. We were really excited we could turn the heat on. Yeah.
Yeah, time of year, I guess, would play a huge role into what you were happiest to have back. Okay, cool. So, the other big thing, from my perspective anyway, that I know you have going on right now is The Haunting of Good Society, which, as we touched on a bit ago, is a playing of the game Good Society. So, real brief before we get into this particular game, just tell the audience, what is Good Society?
Good Society is so fun. Okay, it is a Jane Austen-inspired TTRPG by Story Brewers Role Playing, and you get to play like tropes from an Austen novel, with lots of romance and really much, speaking of mundane, like mundane scandals. And drama that is only drama because everyone's gasping and saying it's drama. And there's even a letter writing phase, the epistolary phase, where your character gets to write letters to the other characters. I just think there's lots of little bits in that game that really encourage the players to get in on world building that makes it one of my favorite games.
Yes. Starting from the session 0, which is built into the game, when I've played it with my friends and family, you spend so much time up front building it, but it's not like, you don't feel like we're just preparing to actually play the game. That's a huge part of playing the game.
Yeah, the session 0, I knew Haunting of Good Society was going to be so fun when we did the session 0. And myself, Eugenio, and Friday, the 3 players, were just like immediately just talking about all like the secrets that we wanted to have and scandals and like we don't get along, but then this is going to happen and then maybe we'll get along after that, and just kind of planning out how we want the story to go. Get a lot of input.
Yes. I like a lot of the pieces in the game as well, like you said, that draw you in. There's the epistolary, which kind of speaks to what we were talking about with Mundane Magic and my vision like for a legacy game of it, where the letter phase is you're looking at the consequences of what happened, and you're sort of running forward the clock to seeing how will that set up the next scene. And you also have the thing I love, and watching Haunting of Good Society is my favorite part. Players get to take on the roles of NPCs for the other characters.
Yes, that's super. I've never experienced that in another RPG. It kind of makes sense that the GM wouldn't have to play, or facilitator wouldn't have to play every single other character, but I would love getting to play side characters.
Yeah, and it invites the players like to take part in that fun. It is fun to play the side characters. Okay, cool. So that's Good Society, Jane Austen RPG. That's the quick pitch for it. So I guess the audience could guess, what is the extra bit that the Haunting of Good Society adds on top of that?
So it takes this like Regency era romance and scandal game, and it adds so many ghosts. So it's basically like your sort of haunted manor, haunted house, Haunting of Bly Manor sort of story, which I felt worked really well with Good Society because it's like the scandals are quiet scandals. Usually everyone's being like, everything is kind of hidden and hush hush and very polite. And there's this quietness, this softness to that type of storytelling that I think works really well with Gothic horror. Especially. It's not hack and slash horror. It's not jump scares. It's things that go bump into the night. Things that are just eerie and slightly off. And usually the characters aren't necessarily like superheroes, like in like D&D, for instance. They don't necessarily have magical powers or super strength or anything to deal with these supernatural things that they're facing. So Haunting of Good Society is sort of like, well, what do you do when just everyday people face some really horrifying things?
You tell me what you think about this, but one way I think about this and how it's a good match, it reminds me of, for me, the best parts about Stephen King. Who's got all kinds of ideas, and some of them are good and some of them are not as good. But the thing I've always liked most about Stephen King is when he takes some real evil or real horror and buries it beneath small town.
Yes.
And it's like, this, you can't even really distinguish if the evil is the town or is corrupting the town. It's kind of one and the same. And it falls into the same category of everything being hidden behind polite smiles.
Yes.
And polite conversation.
Oh, 100% yes. And I mean, we're in just a small town called Honeyfield in the Haunting of Good Society. What possibly could go wrong in a place called Honeyfield? So it's definitely that small town horror vibe.
Many things is the answer.
Yeah. So many things, Lisa. Are you not watching the show?
As a way for people who have not watched so far, the videos are on YouTube, yes?
Yes.
As a way to entice, what's been a favorite moment for you from the Haunting of Good Society?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'll just very quickly say the premise of our show is that we are the Cluett sisters. We were, as children, we were detectives solving a bunch of crimes and murders and supernatural cases. And then something happened that caused us to leave our homes and each other. And so we've been separated for 10 years and we are reuniting over a wedding. Oh my gosh, favorite moments. I feel like I have to pick two things. One is that even though there are like really horrifying, scary things happening in the show, which we almost sort of just see as like silhouettes moving behind a curtain most of the time. My sisters keep bullying me. And in the rumors and scandals phase, keep dogpiling on me and making rumors and scandals about me. Like my hair is dyed. We've got potential vampires, people.
Is this really our biggest concern right now?
Yeah. So I think that's really fun. And then my other favorite / least favorite moment was because TK Johnson is our facilitator, or we call them our chaperone, and they are a master at horror. And this is going to be spoilers, but it's just in the second episode. We finally meet this contact who says they have information about this mysterious Count Simon who our childhood friend has married. And he seems like super off. Like something's wrong with him. He's very skittish. And then when he finally reveals what's wrong with him, he starts peeling back his skin, his hair, and reveals this monstrous form underneath this flesh suit he was wearing.
It's such a good, I feel like,
Ugh.
thesis statement for the game of like the monster that's underneath the polite countenance.
Yeah, oh my god, yes. God, I'm like thinking TK described it way better / more horribly. I'm making a face right now.
People should definitely check it out. I've been enjoying watching it so far.
Thank you.
And I guess a way to wrap up here, just because obviously we both like good society, just more generally, what is it that makes Regency period romance so good? What do you like about it?
I mean, I think it's that no one is being fully truthful, whether it's something extremely petty and they're just being very polite, or they have this other darker secret. I kind of like the feeling that everybody feels they have to be wearing a mask of some sort. I feel like that makes for some really juicy stories with some really interesting reveals in them. What about you?
I think bringing it to games a little bit, my favorite game moments, like just straight up D&D or like other games that I've run that are in a more traditional fantasy setting, I feel like some of the most memorable sessions always take place in a ball, because it's just so easy to, like you say, create drama and create interesting interactions. And there's so many possibilities of what could happen there. And Good Society is like, what if the whole game was that?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, sign me up. That's what I want.
It's just that, and like weaving stories and just getting to talk to the other characters.
Yes.
Those are that I love social interactions, so it's like just my favorite part of other RPG games.
And when you build in this web of characters that get to have all these interesting and unexpected interactions, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. I realize I never really said how Good Society inspired Mundane Magic.
Yes,
do you mind if I quickly touch on that?
No, please.
So Good Society, one of the ways it creates all of these wonderful scenarios we were talking about is because its core mechanic are these resolve tokens. There's no dice rolling. And tokens basically allow you to just make something in the story happen. If it's like a consequential thing you want to make happen, or something that is maybe considered bad happening to someone else's character, you use a resolve token. And the limits on that is that you offer resolve tokens to someone else, so they can accept it with conditions, or they can politely decline. And this concept that you don't have to make dice rolls, but that you can just tell a story and just have things happen, and it's limited by something small, like someone, whether they accept it or not, but also just presumably you're all playing this game together because you want to tell the same sort of story together. So you're not going to make something completely derail the story and like be like aliens land and abduct us and now we're in space. You're unlikely to use a resolve token to do that. You're more likely to say, oh, I don't know, someone had a wardrobe mishap at the ball or something like that.
Or an example they give, your rival's carriage threw a wheel on its way to the ball.
Yes. True. So true evil. Things you can do with your resolve tokens. But then it's limited mostly only by people wanting to tell the same sort of story together. That really inspired me for Mundane Magic. And that's where the idea for the spell tokens came from. I was like, well, I love resolve tokens. Can there be something like that, but for creating spells? And then what other limits do I feel like have to be in place to kind of rein in magic in that way?
Yeah, and the inherent strength in both of those is the ebb and flow you get between either characters in the game or the characters and the GM, where you're exchanging some narrative power right now so that you can maybe do something later.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Good Society, for that light bulb moment for me.
Truly. And I think it's a good place to wrap up. So thank you, Lysa, for coming on the show today.
This was super fun.
Please tell the people, where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, I'm easy. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, or Twitch at Lysa Penrose. That's Lysa Penrose. And you can also see my portfolio and find my podcast, Behold Her podcast, all about badass femmes in the realm of tabletop over at lysapenrose.com.
Awesome. As a fan of Lysa, I would say check all these things out, please. Thank you again for being here, and that's it. I don't have an extra line after that.
Woohoo! We did it!
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. You can find me on Twitter at Rocket Orca, Kenny as at Wolfmere, and John is at Crossways GM. Tabletop Babble is part of the Geekspective Network. Go to Geekspective.com to check out all our other shows or follow us on Twitter at Geekspective. Our theme music was provided by the Battle Bards.